Hi guys, and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Iwano and I hope you're doing well and doing just like her. So in this video, I'm going to share with you on how the Lord moved me from the new age to Jesus. This is my story on how I have been moving on my journey with the Lord from being a baby Christian to, I might say, a Christian that is mature in their walk of faith. Yeah, so this is my story. In case you don't know what the new age is, it is simply a belief in mysticism, a belief in crystals and also astrological things, and also the belief that you are able to talk to the universe and it brings anything into your favor. Anything that you speak into the universe, it is what is going to come to you. And also just the belief that you are a certain type of a person who is special in their way, to an extent that whatsoever you demand, you give main character energy, and so whatever you need will be given to you. So that is the simplest explanation of what the new age is. And my story starts way back in 2017. So to give a background story, I am a preacher's kid and I have grown up in the church. I have come to know Jesus through my parents. I've come to know about Christianity, how to live, how to have a relationship with the Lord through my parents. But in the midst of all these things, I never knew the Lord for myself. I never knew him. So it goes to a point where in this year of 2017, I just finished high school and I was waiting to go to college. And at the time, I was a person who was so on fire for the Lord. I would always go to church. I would always do everything, despite me not having that full understanding that I need to have a relationship with the Lord, not necessarily that my parents believe in a certain type of a God. I should also believe in them. I should also believe in their God. But rather, I didn't have that relationship with the Lord. But at the same time, I was a person who was so on fire with church things. I was always there. If you need me to teach the Sunday school, I would teach. If you need me to do anything, I would definitely do it. So it got to a point where I was so active in the house of God. I'm new apostolic by faith. Yeah. It goes to a point where I had to fall sick. I had fallen ill with chronic hemorrhoids. I tell you, they are really horrible. If you don't know what hemorrhoids are, I'll put up something here. Yeah, so I got hit by hemorrhoids at the time, and it started pulling on my faith. It is something that had started some time back, but then as I was growing older, they also started growing chronic. They started getting bad. They started getting worse by the month. So I got to a point where I started questioning my faith to say, if I'm indeed a child of God, and if I ask God to heal me of this disease that I have right now, he would definitely heal. He is going to help me out. So I set out to pray and ask the Lord to heal me from those things. But the more I prayed, the more I stayed faithful in the house of God, the more I believed that the Lord will heal me, the worse things got every time. So I was like, no way, because I became so suicidal because I didn't tell anyone at this time. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell any of my family members, not even my friends, because it was just way too shameful for me to start sharing such a private thing with them, where things are coming from a very, we'll say a holy place on your body. Yeah. So it was something else. And every time I prayed that the Lord should heal me, I believed that the Lord would heal me, things got worse. So at the time I got so suicidal, I opened up to my parents and I told them that every time I go to the toilet, this is what is happening. And my parents got so paranoid. Every time they wanted to talk to me, every time they were in my presence, they would hide it, but I could see through them that these people indeed are so concerned with what is happening to me, So I just got to a point that there's no way I can keep on believing in a God that is not concerned about me, that does not care about me, despite me being so faithful in the house of the Lord. You know, it's at this point, I had started growing and backsliding in my faith. I didn't want anything to do with church. I could go to church because my parents are my father is a preacher. I'm a preacher's kid. I needed to be in church. I needed to present a certain type of personality with my family, and it just got so worse by the time. And I remember this vividly. There was a time I just said that, God, I don't want anything to do with you. I don't believe that you exist. And I also don't believe that the devil exists. All those things are lies. We're just being brainwashed by this whole Christianity thing. So at that time, I was done. I didn't want anything to do with spirituality. I didn't want anything to do with anything that connected me to the Lord, or to anything concerning the enemy. No, you have to act in a certain type of way for you to overcome this rival that we all have as Christians, So I didn't want anything to do with that specific thing. I was done. I was done with the Lord. So I'm a person who really loves to read. I love reading so much, and reading it's part of me. I can say in here there are a lot of books. Yeah, so it got to a point where instead of me really doing things out of love, out of me doing it for the Lord, that these are the things that He requires me to do them, I was doing them as a duty that my parents expected me to fulfill every time and then. So it goes to a point where we had tried all the African herbs on my hemorrhoids. We had tried everything. Nothing was working. At the time, I was done with God. I didn't want anything to do with Him, not even the devil himself. Yeah. So as time went by, my parents, through my sister, managed to book me a surgery with a certain doctor from the UK. Yeah. So they were coming. We went to a mission hospital at the time. At this point as well, I wasn't believing anything. I didn't want anything to do with God. If they said, let us pray, I could close my eyes, and in my heart, I was like, I don't want anything. I don't even want anything to do with the Lord. I could say the amens, I could pretend as if everything is okay, but on the inside, I knew that I was done with the Lord. I didn't want anything to do with Jesus, anything to do with God, So in the midst of that whole scenario, in the midst of that whole confusion, I discovered a book called the Ante That. So the main thing that this book talks about is that whatsoever happens inside of you, it is not you, but rather there's a deeper self inside of us, and this deeper self requires you to connect yourself. It posed a question that really drove me crazy. Like, when you were growing up, who was observing all the things that were growing? When you are being a person, when you're transitioning from childhood to adulthood, who is observing all those things? It talks of not being defined by my own thoughts. Like, I should not identify with my thoughts. I shouldn't identify with anything. I shouldn't identify with anything so long it was in my head, and that I had the power to bring to manifestation anything that I had placed my mind into it. And I was like, okay, this is a really good thing, At the time also, I had friends around who introduced me to astrology, and also just there are some zodiac signs that I learned, and I also got to learn about my zodiac sign, the people that it collaborates with, so that we have a good relationship. It could be family, platonic relationships, and all those. So it kept on going and going, and I started identifying with that. And astrology, especially zodiac signs, became my main thing. And also the aspect now that I had learned that whatsoever my thoughts say, whatsoever the deeper self says, is indeed me, And there's also the section of the book where it was talking about having a glimpse of eternity, because we ourselves are spiritual beings. And time went by, I believed in those things. I started practicing it, in the midst of me practicing all those things, I got to think that I am not close to certain family members and relatives because they are not in collision, or they are not in harmony with my zodiac sign, so it got so worse. It got so worse that I was toxic. I didn't care whether I was rude, I was respectful, I could say my mind. And whilst we are doing all these things, it's now post surgery. The surgery was successful. Thanks to the Lord, all glory to the Lord. The surgery was successful. I recovered quickly, and just after a few weeks I went into college. That is where now the real business began. And whilst in college, right, I met so different people. I could still go to church from time to time, and I discovered my love for alcohol at this time, and my love for going out and partying and drinking every weekend. At first I was doing it secretly. I didn't want anybody to know about it. So everybody would look at me, would think that, oh, he's got his life figured out, he's got everything going on in his favor, he's blessed. I managed to put up an image where they couldn't see past that. All they could see was this perfect person, a bubbly person, a happy person, and all those, and in that area. So in college I could club. By the way, my grades were great. Okay, I wasn't the best student, but they were average, in short. I could always study and pass. I could attend certain lectures and not attend some, but I would go to a test and still make it. Yeah. So in the second semester of my first year, I didn't do so well because my drinking got so bad, my clubbing got so bad. It got to a point where if my parents gave me pocket money, part of it, I would reserve it just for me to go out and club, So now, as time kept on moving, there was a club in school. I in my head, I was like, I don't give a damn. I don't want anybody, I don't even care about what anybody else thinks, as long as I am right in my own manner, and that the spiritual person that is inside of me and the general spiritual ideology that I had created for myself is in line with whatsoever I was doing, and as long as somebody wasn't harmed, I was okay. At this point, I started drinking in school. I started doing all sorts of things. Remember, there's also an aspect of smoking in the background. That is how bad it got. Yeah, I kept on living that life for some time. My grades were going down the drain all the time, and it just got to a point where my life was moving apart, was falling apart in my own hands. And it's so bizarre that our own lives are in our hands. It's a good thing, but at the same time, at that point, it was bad for me, because how can I have my own future in my hands, which I don't even see? At this point, I was toxic in my thinking, in my speech, in my behavior, and everything that is about me was just toxic. It is the best word to describe and summarize the whole ideology I had created with my friends. I had started creating friendships with people that didn't align with my purpose. I was always out with people that did not fulfill my calling, that does not fulfill the vision that the Lord himself has for my life. I was a bad person, a terrible person. I could insult, I could curse, I could do literally everything and anything outside of that box. Yeah. So as life kept on moving, as I continued in the almost new lifestyle that I had, there's a person that actually reported me to my parents, and thankfully they confronted me about it, and I managed to convince them, because to my parents, they believed that they had taken a child who is well behaved, but on the inside, that was the exact opposite of what they had believed. And if my mom and dad watches this video, I'm sorry, all these things happened. Yeah. So life life kept on happening. I could miss church. There could be times when I would club the whole night. And as long as it was a Friday, I would go out. As long as it were a Friday, I would go out, drink. And on a Sunday, with my hangover, I would sit in church and pretend as if everything is okay. And I would be, okay, my acting skills at the time were great. Yeah, I'm not praising it, but they were perfect. I could masquerade it so well. If I were a circus actor, or if I were involved in a circus, definitely I would perform so well back at the time. Yeah, so this belief kept on moving. Yeah, so things kept on moving down the drain just like that. And then it got to a point where my life wasn't just moving the way it was supposed to. I felt like nothing is working out. And whilst in my almost new belief, in that new ideology, religion, I should say, my mini religion that I had created, my relationship with the universe, and also astrology, mysticism, belief that there could be somebody who can speak into my life, who can see through my future, all those things were just not fulfilling a certain aspect of my life. I always have this belief that inside of us, there's a God-given void that only Him can fill. And if He doesn't do that, then it's not gonna work out as we expect it to. Yeah, so things were just rough, things were bad, things were horrible. My personality was worse, was toxic, and I was pathetic in general. Yeah, it goes to a point where I didn't want to live that life anymore. I didn't want to live that life anymore, because at this point I was this close to becoming a witch. Because all the characteristics I have explained in this video are almost the baseline and the foundation off of which witches are made, and yeah, I just realized to an extent that all the friendships that I had made, all the things that I was doing were not in line with my purpose. And this realization came through when we went for oh my gosh I'm not gonna cry, I'll be okay. Yeah, and this realization came when I had attended a conference where I spoke to an audience for the first time, and I was giving some type of an encouragement. I was given this opportunity, this platform to express myself, how I felt about certain things. And also, okay, for me it was all an act, because I needed something in return from the audience I was speaking to, and that is votes from them. At the time I was vying for vice presidency for the school union. Yeah, and I could portray this great personality so that people get to like me and love me. Yeah, but yeah, I did all those things just for that. But then there's a lecturer who came and gave a very touching speech that I felt was specifically for me. They meant it just for me. And he was talking about how all the things, our cell phones, all the gadgets that we buy, all the furniture that we buy, they do come with a manual. But for us as human beings, we are never born with that manual, but we do find it here on earth, and that manual is the Bible. And the author of that Bible is the Holy Spirit, through his inspiration of the people that he had inspired to write his word. So he talked of how we align ourselves with the Bible, how we align our lives in that regard, and just hold ourselves accountable with every action that we take. I remember at this point sitting in an audience, and I was like, my life right now is not making sense, because I am literally not fulfilled in this new life that I have created for myself, and I'm not happy with the person that I have become. So he spoke a lot of things. He spoke life into my mind, my life at that point, and I was literally breathing, and I felt the love of God touch me through the speech that he gave. And it was at that time, that was my turning point. I got aware of the jewelry that I had acquired throughout this process of me being a spiritual person and being a woke person, and I started cutting off certain friendships. There are just some things that wasn't making sense to me anymore, and I got to meet Jesus for the very first time, and that was in 2020. I got to meet Jesus for myself and know him for myself. It is from that point then on that I decided to say, let me try out the Jesus thing one more time. Out of that trial, Jesus began to manifest his love for my life. He began to convict me every time I read the Bible. I went to church. This time around, I wasn't going to church because somebody wanted me to, but I had gone out of the genuine aspect, the genuine inspiration of the Holy Spirit for me to go and sit and listen to the word from the altar of his grace. And I was there. They talked of how we are living in a time of grace, how the Lord still loves us despite the things, the dirt that we have done. And here we are, years later, 3 years later, and here I am. It has not been an easy journey. There has been certain things that have been haunting me from that very past, and I am trying by all means to cut them down, and definitely they are falling, And one thing that I've just discovered, that if I'm not in the presence of Jesus, if I'm not in line with him, all I want to do is drink, go to the clubs, insult, watch pornography, and lust after a lot of things and many bad things that my flesh would desire. That is what I discovered about me being in the new age. So it is not a place I would want to go back to. I met Jesus at a point where I was a mess. I was pathetic, and things were not just moving the way I wanted them to. But after meeting Jesus, it has been the best roller coaster ever. I know things may not always move in my favor. Things may not move according to how I want them, but I know that I am submitted and I'm always in his grace. And the safest place for me to be in is the will of God and the will that he has for my life. That is how I met Jesus and moved away from the new age. I am glad to have shared this story with you. It has been sitting on my mind for quite some time, and this is literally the best time for me to share it. I love you all, and peace out. I'll see you in my next video.